All right, we are back here talking a little pop culture stuff, and we're actually melding the world of pop culture and sports this week with a look at the HBO documentary that aired last week on Wednesday, Wild Card, Fall of a Loudmouth, about Craig Carton's issues with the gambling that led to his arrest by the FBI and his life after the fact. Join me today, one of our pop culture team here, the great Alan Austin is back. Alan, how are you?
I'm well, Mike. Thanks for having me. How are you, sir?
Doing pretty good, and I have to say I did check this out the day after it aired, and I admit it was very intriguing.
Yes, I watched it that night. I could not wait, and the Showtime app does something that HBO doesn't, and that's it's going to release it at 9 a.m. regardless of what time it premieres. So when I jumped on HBO at like 5 p.m., I'm like, where is it? Where is it? I'm like, they don't put it on at the beginning of the day. So I waited and waited, and I watched it that night, and I loved that it was only $1.26 in the runtime. And I thought it was very, very interesting, and there was a lot that they crammed into that amount of time, but I also have some things that I wish they expanded on. So what did you think of it?
I was very intrigued by it because I think they did spend a good amount of time setting up the backstory here. And speaking of backstory, I want to start there. Like, what was your background with the Boomer and Carton show when it was actually on the air on WFAN?
So it ran for 10 years from 2007 to 2017. And a lot of that time, I actually was not around the New York area. I graduated high school in 2007 and went to college for 4 years in the Pittsburgh area. And then in 2014, I moved to Los Angeles. But that whole time, I had heard from some of my best friends about Boomer and Carton, about how funny it was, about how it wasn't your typical, morning drive sports talk show. It was more like a radio show in the vein of not as raunchy as, but in the Opie and Anthony kind of, we're going to have jokes, we're going to mess around with our guests. And then when I would be home for periods of time, they would be a must listen for me. So like, my fondest memories of Boomer and Carton are Carton just ripping on the likes of Susan Waldman or Jerry Manuel or Mike Francesa and just going on and on. And I definitely listened to the podcast version of episodes, like the cut episodes to get the greatest hits or whatever. I was a fan for sure.
Yeah, I remember that show. I was not much of a morning person back then, but I always managed to keep an eye on what the highlights were. I remember they did a good job hitting some of the big moments of that era, like especially the moment when the Carton actually walked down the Brooklyn Bridge in a Speedo after the Giants pulled off a big upset in the playoffs. That was fun. And he was, as they show pointed out, he was just a true radio personality where he could put on an entire act for himself, and then when the mic flipped off, he was just normal Craig.
Yeah, I think the one thing the documentary had to do for people who may not be familiar with Carton is kind of showcase wacky skits and wacky bits he did, like wearing masks and jumping on tables. But I think Carton's real humor was just, the real honest takes on things. So I get what they had to do with the wackiness to show he's wacky. But my joy when listening to Carton wasn't necessarily wacky. It was more his intense, no nonsense humor on situations around the New York sports market.
Yeah, that's for sure. And we've heard Carton over the years get very animated on a number of topics. And as this documentary did very well, they did point out a lot about the amount of gambling stuff Carton brought to the show. And I think, to me, the most intriguing parts of this whole thing were the deep dive into gambling. This is something, I'll admit, I do gambling on this podcast. We do NFL picks every week. We'll talk about stuff like the over-unders or March Madness, but the level Craig went to with the gambling, it just showed you how dangerous it can be if you get too addicted to something.
Absolutely. And I myself have felt like I've played a little too much blackjack now that it's in New Jersey. It is available on your phone at any time, day or night. And I've had to stop. And I haven't lost nearly as much money as they claim to Craig have lost in this film, to the point where what I thought was a gambling problem for me, it was like nothing. It was like a joke compared to what this guy and others like him have gone through. I mean, to me, the most shocking revelation in the film was the loss of the 1.5 million plus the 500,000 on top of it in one night when he was already up. That was crazy. And the betting $30,000 a hand, that is just astronomical, and I could not believe my ears.
Yeah, I couldn't either. I mean, this stuff with Carton with the gambling goes back to like I said, it goes back to his childhood, because the story about when he was a kid and how he was using the Intellivision game to basically run a mini gambling ring. He basically like won a kid's bike off of him. I was like, wow.
Yeah, that goes to show that it's something that he was confident in as well. Yeah. It was built early, this confidence that he cannot lose when it comes to blackjack. And it spun out of control, clearly, to the point where the man spent time in prison. And he said that was his biggest fear his entire life, was going to prison, yet ultimately he didn't stop himself from doing so because of the addiction.
Yeah. And I forget the name of the expert they had on there, but they made a great point about the analogy of the blackjack. They said, honestly, doing blackjack's like doing cocaine, because like you guys need the hit to get the action, and they sort of get the rush from doing it. And I could see sort of how it sort of builds that addiction like in you of like, oh, I need more. I need to get another hit. One more hand.
And the point of Carton not being able to sit and wait for the cards to be shuffled is a prime example of that in his case.
Yeah, because that's another clear sign. Because usually, like he said, it's like the 5 minutes waiting for them to shuffle a deck, which is too long for him. He just needed to get that rush of the action right away. And the one story I think I've heard people on the WFAN like show who were interviewed in this thing, like Boomer or Siason, Al Dukes, the whole crew, was like the whole moment the Boomer bet really sort of was like the catalyst for all this, when he makes a bet on air with Boomer that Boomer gave him $10,000 of his money and he can double it, and he ends up winning, I think, like $100,000 total. So like that is like, I feel like that was in the moment like fun radio, but it really set off like a domino effect, really changed the course of like Craig's life.
Yeah, and you gotta it's tough because when you're put on a show, radio or anywhere, you like to make good content, and you don't necessarily think all the time of what are the consequences. You know what I mean? And it gets trickier when it does have to do with stuff that is addiction based and gambling. And it's a crazy thing, because this is a guy who worked for WFAN, is clearly a gambling addict, went to prison because his gambling and side businesses and interests got out of control. Yet on WFAN now, almost every other bump to break is a ad for a sports gambling website that you're getting a special code to join. And it's just so crazy to me that it's like a cautionary tale, but there's also a heavy influence for you to do it anyway. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I mean, John Destremski right now on WFAN, I think nightly has like an odds-on sports show, where it's just like 6 at 6:30 talk about gambling every single night.
Yeah, and I get it that that's where the money is now, especially in New Jersey, where it's legal, and the big listener market for WFAN. It's almost counterproductive to release this documentary, and the people who are going to watch it mainly are those who are told every day, join William Hill, join DraftKings, join FanDuel. It's so ironic, and I just, it boggles my mind a little bit, but I get it, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if I missed this, but did they put like a thing at the end of the documentary offering resources for people who have gambling addictions, or did they not include that?
If they did, I did not see it.
I think that's a miss if they didn't do it. And again, I have to go back and double check the tape and see if they put something in there. But like in this day and age, I think you do need to include something in there about that.
Absolutely, especially because Chris Christie was the big attack opioid governor, and he was featured heavily in this film. You've got to offer the resources, you've got to show that there's a serious tale here that needs to be listened to and learned from.
Yeah, and what else from the film really stuck out to you? What really caught your attention?
Well, you talk about offering resources for gambling victims. They should also be offering resources for victims of sexual abuse, and where they can reach out for help because that was something that I was not expecting from this film. And why would you? You know what I mean? You don't know the man's life. But to hear that story was pretty crazy, especially from someone like Carton, who always seems so sure of himself, and that he's been hiding this traumatizing experience for most of his life. Really shocking stuff, and definitely shocked by its revelation here in this film.
Yeah, and that was obviously a very powerful story, and they did a good job giving it context by showing his on-air reactions to the Jerry Sandusky story. And I remember at the time saying, "I'm like, wow, like Craig is taking this very seriously, and it's something that's not that's like out of character for like goofy Craig, but like once you understand the context, oh, that's why he's taking it so seriously."
Them using that clip of Sandusky was really strong.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think that was a great example, because even Boomer in the interview said, like, I'd never seen Craig get so wound up on something like that, and now you understand why. And I think that does show the importance of it. And I think that's another missed opportunity of the film. I know they definitely didn't see anything about like promoting, like, oh, like if you need resources for that area, go there. I was disappointed in that.
For sure. And again, it may have happened after the credits, but that should be the first thing you see after they say Craig is negotiating a new deal. Boom, send your resources.
Yeah, you brought that up, Peace, and this is one thing that they meant on there. They said Craig's negotiated radio comeback because he's out of prison right now. He's seemed to have gotten his life in order. The rumor right now is that he's going to go back to WFAN and take over Afternoon Drive with an ex-athlete. And I get the WFAN conundrum because Joe and Evan have moved to midday to take the Francesa slot, and they've gotten killed in the ratings pretty much like by Kay since they got there. Do you think that's the right fit there?
Here's my conundrum, because and this is in all honesty, I enjoy Boomer and Gio more than I enjoyed Boomer and Carton.
Yeah.
And I liked Boomer and Carton, but I just think Boomer and Gio is a more complete, more lighthearted, yet still hilarious show. So I'm a huge fan of Boomer and Gio. Now, I think if you put on ex-athletes and Craig Carton in the Afternoon Drive, you're almost going to get a similar kind of show. And I think that's not necessarily good. I think you need diversity. You need diversity in content. You need different types. Like, if you look at the fan lineup now, you've got Boomer and Gio, who are hilarious in the morning. You've got Moose and Maggie, who are way more X's and O's and sports talk based on what happened, what they think will happen, interviews with guests. And you've got Joe and Evan, who are kind of the mix of the two, because their comedy comes from being disgruntled sports fans and pointing out the obvious, yet they also care about the games and what's going to happen. So I think if you pile it on with Carton and the guests, you're going to get the first show, but a little harsher, and it's going to be not enough. You need, I think, a little bit more of a mix. So I'm a little worried that might be too similar to Boomer and Gio, and I don't necessarily think it's going to beat Michael Kay at the moment. And that's just how I feel about that. And then I could see a disagreement the other way. It's just I don't know how I don't necessarily think it's the move, and I think it's going to be odd having Carton take the Francesa spot, which Boomer and Carton would make fun of for so many years.
Yeah, I get the appeal from WFAN. It's like, oh, he's a name, he'll draw ratings, and people. And remember, when we had him on our air, he was good. And I've heard the ripple effects. Basically, like, I will admit the Joe and Evan thing did not. I don't think it's working in the midday in the drive time slot, because like Joe's shtick, I think, has gotten a bit old because it's very repetitive, and like you can tell at times like he's kind of mailing in the performance. I think he did want to retire before they incentivized him to move up with the raise. I could see, okay, maybe get Joe out of there. I think maybe. And they're talking about moving Evan back to midday with Maggie Graham, sort of like knocks my friend of the podcast, Mark Malusis, out of the mix. None of this is confirmed. Obviously, I expect an announcement coming some point around November, but I think what if you sort of leave the midday intact? What if you put like JJ with Evan? I think that dynamic would be more fun.
Yeah, I think it would be more fun. I would also be interested in the JJ and Carton mix.
Yeah.
Get rid of the ex-athlete thing, because the ex-athlete thing is so hit or miss generally. Just get two New York-based sports guys with big personalities put together and see what happens for a couple months. All this is trial and error anyway, And the WFANs had some rocky roads to navigate. I mean, Carton situation is still pretty fresh, only a couple years old. You had the Carlin, Bart, and Maggie show it just disrupted and exploded on them. And a lot of that's WFAN self-inflicted wounds, I believe.
Yeah.
So now you're going to have the new schedule just get changed again. Tells you how tough radio is. But I think I do worry. Mark Malusis is a great guy, and I do worry that he's going to be the casualty of all this, and that makes me very upset.
Yeah, it does, because like I do think like Moose is obviously a very loyal guy to that station, and like I think like he brings a lot to it, and I think having a nice like a defined slot for him is good. But like I get the look optics of it on their end, and I might say, okay, like if we like it's hard for us because like I think like the odd one out besides Joe, I don't think like the transition to radio for Mackie has not been great, and I get part of that was just the constant changing of the partners and like the changing time slots, but like. I get WFA in this day and age does not want to say, oh boy, we want to get rid of our only like female like radio sports radio host. I get that part of it.
Yeah, I get it. It's a business, you know. We as fans have our favorites, but they like Mark Chernoff for whichever shows he produces there. I don't know if he's in charge of the whole station, but he's got a business to run, and it's very tricky. And it's in 2020, it's harder than ever. So it's going to be something to watch for sure. But I tell you what, I will, for one, be listening to that first Carton show when it airs, no matter where or when it is.
Yeah, I think that's basically a lock. I feel like they're just sort of right now trying to figure out who to put him with. I think that, like I said, I think watch late November. Usually they announce it because I think like you'll get previews at Carton in December, and then like January 1, January 2 will be when they roll out their new lineup.
Yes. Okay. So I'm very interested to see. And one more thing about the film, I wish they touched on his family a little bit more. And I know they say at the beginning, I didn't want my family to be a part of this, but I still think that's such a huge deal for people who are dealing with gambling addictions or stuff like that to know how it worked out with his family. Did his wife ever leave him and come back to him? Was she there for him the whole time and support? I really wanted to know how the family aspect went. I think it could have been covered without involving them.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was one thing that's definitely missing and odd, because I noticed that like none of his family members were interviewed for the piece. I get Carton probably said like they don't have like you want me, you don't get them in it. But I think you can at least ask Craig the question and let Craig tell you what happened on that end.
100%. I think it's a big glaring omission that they don't.
Okay, so if we were to grade Wild Card, how would you grade it?
I'd give it a B plus.
The John Stanko B plus?
No, because that's an A plus plus. I'm giving it a normal B plus. I think for someone outside the New York market who doesn't know Carton and they watch this film, they're gonna maybe think that the heavier issues were not expanded on enough because they don't know who this guy is. So they're not connected through just, oh, I'm a Craig Carton fan. They're going to want to know, you know, about the family aspect, about the abuse aspect, which they do cover well, but I think there could have been a little bit more to it. So to spend so much time on the radio stuff is well and good for people like us. But for someone who's not watching the film, I'm trying to think, who's not familiar with the cast of characters, and trying to think how they would react. So I give it a B plus. I think it's very well done. I think all the talking heads are effective. I think they go into the gambling and the severity of it. I think it's a very, very good documentary.
Yeah, I give it a B because it held my attention. It was certainly well done. It was pretty good, but it was just those things that were missing. It just sort of keep it from going to that next level for me. Like, it's watchable, sure. Like, you watch it, like, and I was not tempted to, look at my phone or go on the computer. That gets points for me, but, like, is it one I'm dying to go back and revisit? No. So that's why I think it sells at a B for me.
That's fine. And one other thing, a feeling I had after the film was, come back to me in a year and 6 months to see if he's not in jail again.
Yeah.
And that's not to say he will be. I don't have expectations that he will be, but it's the kind of story. And addicts, how many times does an addict need to find bottom before they truly get out of it? And I know he went to prison, but I'd like to see a follow-up, see how he's doing in 6 months or so. Because I think by releasing the documentary now, you don't give yourself the opportunity to be like, he's fully redeemed. You kind of give we hope he's fully redeemed. Here he is he's walking across the Brooklyn Bridge as a free man. But really, we don't know how time after prison has tempted him or not.
Yeah, I wonder, like, maybe if you're right about that. Maybe it's better served if, like, in like a year we had this release next year and we get some perspective of like him back on the air and like his new partner and people WFAN now, because like, and I do think it's interesting. And like, I also think another thing I just thought of now that they didn't cover in there is like, I wonder like if we could have gotten a little tiny bit from like Gio about like what it was like to try and like rebuild that show after he left.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think what you just said is perfect. To release the film a year from now, because they do end it with the information that he negotiated a new deal. So why are we rushing the release of this? Because 2020 and you need content. But at the same time, I think it would have been much more effective to add another 10 minutes, 5 even, in a year from now with more updated information to complete the film.
Yeah, I think you could have made it hour 35 and been fine. I think that works for that. But let's move on to some other things while we're here. And I do want to acknowledge it because we did do a draft offline for this. The Big Brother All-Star season, big bust. And unfortunately, I think your team was the first one completely wiped out.
It happens. I mean, it's just I've been reading a lot of, comments that season 16 ruined the show, in the sense that you find a group, you bond together, and you don't break the alliance. And then once it gets down to the final 6 or so, you take each other out. And I did hear that because season 16 is so well regarded with its cast of characters, that players who aren't familiar with the game, that's the season that casting gives them to watch. So that's the way they learn to play the game. So it's kind of a conundrum, but you would think All-Stars would be able to avoid that. And the players who would have avoided that were all bounced because of that strategy. So it really did take over the game. And where we're at now, I am literally not rooting for anyone who's left. So it's like I'm watching because I'm a fan more so than because I'm connected or care for any of these people. And that's a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. I mean, like, I'm sitting here that as of recording, there are 5 people left in the game. I happen to have 3 of the 5 left in the draft, so I'm probably going to win it. But like, I'm not invested in it really, because like I'm just sort of watching because like, okay, I'm a fan, I like the show, but like, it's not really like, oh, I have to root for so and so to win. It's not interesting to me, because it's like, at this point, it's like, yes, they got unlucky where like a couple of times the underdogs could have like were like seconds away or like inches away from winning a competition and changing the balance of power in the game, but the big alliance steamrolled everything, and then that's it. And then it was just like good night, and that's all that really happened this season.
Yeah, and Enzo not voting out Nicole over David was a real missed opportunity for some glimmer of hope for fans watching. And this is coming from a character who is probably the most likable left in the house, and yet he's still chickened out after he's been saying he's going to make a big move, and he didn't do anything. So it's just been an overall disappointing season, which, I cannot wait for next season where there's a cast of all new people, and hopefully it happens.
Hopefully they don't show him season 16, and whenever they show him what to do.
They show him 20.
Show him 17. I think that'll be a better season.
17 was a little bit more well-rounded. Not as exciting, but I'm actually a fan of 17.
Yeah, I think they'll give him 20, and 20 at least you'd have some hope there.
For sure.
Yes, and obviously we'll have a little fun with this. Like, off the top of your head, like, obviously one thing about that experience of Big Brother is that they're stuck inside a house. They get no access to the outside world. They're in this bubble, and they have no idea what's been going on in the world as a whole. So, like, what's like one thing? Let's do a quick little mini draft here. Give me like, we'll do 2 things each. Like, what do you think they're gonna be most shocked to find out when they leave the house? I'll give you the first choice.
Well, the first choice is the President of the United States getting the coronavirus, which he was so against for so long, and he couldn't possibly get it. Oh my God, that would be the most shocking thing so far, for sure, for them to find out.
Yeah, I think for me, the next one, I'll stay on that political theme, is like just showing them what the first debate looked like. I think that in itself, they'll just be like, what the hell happened in here?
I think a lot of them will wish they can go back into the house and the solitary confinement.
Yeah.
I think the house or solitary confinement rather than listen to that debate or watch what happened.
Yeah, that's true. And what about one more? Give me one more thing that you'll be surprised to find out that when they leave the house.
Sure, and I'll keep it sports. I believe Memphis is a Miami Heat fan.
Yeah.
Because he made a comment during their little sitcom segment with Kaiser that things we're missing right now. The Heat go to the finals, and the Heat are in the finals and surviving. So I think, at least for Memphis, not that he deserves any good news based on the way he's carried himself this season, but I think he'd be shocked to see the Heat in the finals.
Yeah, the Heat are in the finals as of recording. They're down 3-2 to the Lakers. I picked the Lakers in 6. I think by the time this comes out, the series will be over. But
you're a genius.
I think right now, my other pick would be like, if you told us people like Dancing with the Stars picked Carol Baskin to be on the show, I think they would be like, what?
But they wouldn't be surprised that she got bounced quickly.
No, I talked about this with Sandra Rose a couple weeks ago. We said the over-under was 3 weeks she's on the show, and she got bounced at 3 weeks in, so it ended up working exactly at the number.
Yeah, I felt bad for Charles Oakley. Thought he deserved better.
He did, but I do feel better that Carol Baskin did not go far in this show, because I still think she killed her husband.
I mean, the guy who owns the rights to Eye of the Tiger is probably so upset because he figured there was at least 3 or 4 more times they could have used it over the season.
Yeah, that's true. And Lily Big Brother in the past, one thing that has come out of late, I am going to play the spoiler warning for this one. The Haunting of Bly Manor is now out on Netflix, the follow-up to Haunting of Hill House. Al, I know you love that. I'm going to do the full season down the line with Sandra Rose in pop culture segments in the future, but right now, you and I got to watch the premiere. What was your big takeaway?
My big takeaway is I had to stop at 36 minutes in because it started getting into doll stuff. And as a kid, nothing frightened me more than Chucky.
Yeah.
Chucky the doll. So if I'm going to watch doll content, I've got to be up as early as possible to be able to get through the day afterwards without worrying about it. Because as much as people are afraid to admit what they're scared of, I am not. That's scary doll content. So I am very intrigued. I think if the little girl said absolutely splendid or whatever it was one more time, my head was going to explode. But I think that's the point.
Yeah.
And I definitely was creeped out. And it's nice to see Mike Flanagan using the same actors from season 1 in different roles, which I thought was really nice touch.
Yeah, I mean, the lead is Olivia Pedretti, who played, I think, like Victoria in the first season. I'm probably messing the name up, but like she's the lead here in this season, and I've seen a couple of the other actors pop up already, which is pretty cool. I do think this one has a lot. Obviously, has the doll thing is creepy as hell. I'm with you on that. Like, it makes it literally. The kids also are like a little out there, and I'm like a little concerned about them. But I do think they set a lot more mystery elements up in the premiere than they did in the Hill House premiere.
Yeah, the Hill House premiere did a lot of exposition as needed, and then they hit you at the end with kind of what the season's going to be all about. While this one was way more suspenseful, I thought. Like, right from the jump, you see a familiar face, I'll say. You're not sure where it's going, and I'm I'm interested. Like, there were a couple jump scares that I've seen so far that were very effective, and also had me go, okay, how is this going to play into the rest of the story? So I am in. I will be watching. And I thought the casting of the children was perfect. They are the creepiest kids you could ever imagine. The girl, Flora, is adorable, and I'm afraid that's gonna be truly haunting, especially because the narrator, so to speak, the person telling the story, kind of hints that the kids may or may not be ghosts. So I'm very interested to see where this goes. And obviously, there are some trailer spoilers, which I've already been able to point out how they're going to fit at least a little bit into the story, which kind of bums me out because to see the reveals later on, I think would have been more effective. But trailers always do that stuff.
Yeah, so I stay clear of the trailer. So I'm gonna watch the episodes and just get like in there. And they did a good job setting up some elements without like really telling you much. Like the main character constantly covering the mirrors is definitely interesting. Angle, you wonder why she's doing that. And you had one of the like people who lives in the house like just doesn't eat, and you have leaves you wondering like why isn't she eating ever? Like there are like nice little like mystery bits that are popping up throughout the episodes.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in. I have to finish the first episode. I'll probably watch it at 9 a.m. sharp at some point soon, and then continue from there because it's all stuff. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in for the long run on that. What else you been keeping up with on the stuff? What have you been streaming?
Well, right now, my fiance and I are streaming Schitt's Creek, which I had never seen, and we're already on season 3 episode. We're on the finale of season 3, and we only started watching like a couple weeks ago. I had never seen it. It swept the Emmys, which was shocking. So we decided to finally sit down and give it a shot, and it is highly enjoyable.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fun one, especially because now I never really pay much attention until the Emmys, so that's something I'm considering going to. I'm keeping an eye on that. Like I've been obviously in game show mode because there's game shows every single night on TV, which is very fun for me because I'm a big game show guy. I cannot wait for like I said, Supermarket's be coming back next week on Sunday. That's going to be fun. I think all the ABC game shows, and I'm intrigued to check out. Like I want to get to the 30 for 30 on Oscar Pistorius that they put on ESPN Plus. I do want to check that out.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. And one other thing I streamed recently, which you and I have talked about off air, was the Watchmen series. And I am a huge fan of that. I thought it was grade A, excellent, and much better than the movie that came out in 2009.
Yeah, the Watchmen series I did with John Stanko a couple of times. I did the premiere and the finale, and we were a hooked eye from the jump. And it just got better and better and better. And then like the flashback episode where Regina King's character basically like lives the life of her grandfather was like literally, I think, one of the best hours of television I've ever seen produced.
It was really strong. And another episode that I thought was just like a fine hour was the 3rd episode, which did the deep dive on Silk Spectre.
Yeah.
I thought that was so good, which was bookended by the phone call, the joke over the phone call. Like just so good. Everything about the show was spectacular. There was one thing I thought they could have expanded on and kind of went deeper with, but other than that, it was just perfect.
How did you like the Ozymandias twist, how they played that?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent, because he is a truly deep, confused individual because he tries desperately to be a face, so to speak, but he is a heel through and through. So it's this interesting dynamic, and I thought Jeremy Irons' portrayal was so layered and so detailed, and it was spectacular.
Yeah, I love how they play with the time in that. About basically each of his segments is like basically like basically like a year in time, and they were sort of advancing him along. And I thought it was brilliant the way. And this is again spoilers for watchers now for a year, and you can go back to I think it was like in the 80s. I talked about the finale of John Stanko, like when we realized that the statue of Ozymandias you see early in the series, you realize that's actually him until the finale, and then that's a pretty wild reveal.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
I think I stopped and applauded that revelation because it was excellent. And another thing, how many series that are only 9 episodes and you don't meet the big bad until the 4th or 5th? Like, that's crazy to me. And they pulled it off very well.
Yeah, I'm with John and I both agree at the times. Like, we are completely fine if it's just one and done, which right now is the plan for it because Dan Lindelof said I have no more stories right now, so I don't want to have it continued. So HBO has done a great job in that regard where not saying, oh, you have to make another season because it was so good. They're saying, okay, we trust your vision. Like if you have another one, you're welcome to come back and do it like 5 years down the road.
Yeah, and I think now with the streaming capabilities, it's not as necessary to redo it. People are going to rewatch the first season for years. Look at The Sopranos. People just rewatch it. And even though it's only one season, people will rewatch it. And I think if they do another season, it's just bound to not be as good.
Yeah, you need the right story if you're going to do that again.
And the Watchmen story was covered. Like, you got it. You did it, guys. Kudos to you. Awesome. Like, great ending, satisfying ending, and a lot of the characters meet the fate that they should, even for better or worse.
Yeah.
Like, it was so well done.
It was phenomenally done. And Alan, I want to thank you for all the time today. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, you can follow you on social media and keep up with the Alan Austin Show.
Of course. The Alan Austin Show is on YouTube, and the social media for me is on Twitter at Alan, ALLEN _Austin _, and on Instagram is Alan Austin Sports.
All right, Alan. Thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure.